Book of Remembrance of Moses, the Tablet of Gabriel, Chapter 2. An account of the original establishment of the law of Jeshurun during the first generation of mankind and of the origins of the three stations of evil. An account of how evil viewed the law of Jeshurun and of how evil can know to come against people before they are born, and how Enoch protected the way. And it came to pass that the presence of the Lord departed away from before the Urim, but a strong presence of his spirit remained upon us. Number 10, reference, there were 12 of us present. And I wept much at the thought of so much evil coming against Israel, our beloved, and against the law of Jeshurun. And my legs were weak from my encounter before the Urim and my grieving, and I had to have assistance to walk back to my seat, and it was difficult for us to return to our usual daily labors. But the Lord was urgent that we continue with the vision without delay. So we set a time, and we all assembled again before the Urim. And it came to pass that as I looked, I saw the Lord standing over a man lying on the ground. And the Lord is very sorrowful. And the Lord looked my way, and he said, I came here to be with you today, to open up to you the very inception of the law of Jeshurun. In a day before it came to be thought of using the term law, and at this very early time I can instruct you about the decisions that were made by both the righteous and by the sons of perdition. And I see the man on the ground before us is Mattaniah, son of Yaatsekawd, and I see his hair is matted with blood. And the Lord said, events have transpired here that are to become the foundation of that which evil will do against the king of Jeshurun, against the law of Jeshurun, and against the God of Jeshurun, and against the man named Jeshurun, and against his people Israel. Reference 11. See Deuteronomy 32, 6 through 9, chapter 15, chapter 33, 4 through 5. And these events that you will see in the vision will reveal that important decisions by the intervention of agency have been made, and identities have been selected by both the righteous and the wicked, and their purposes, both for good and for ill, have been set in motion for the long duration of the earth, starting with these events now to be unfolded before you. And it is important for my people to learn how the conflict all began between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, so that my people Israel, through understanding and faith, can overcome to accomplish their vision. And the truth will empower them, and understanding will bring them wisdom. And when it is their time to perform their vital work for my Father, they can come prepared in all things, and they can rightfully anticipate the course that evil will take against them, and thus arise victorious. And I see others coming upon Mattaniah lying there, and they are very afraid, and they approach to view him as though there is danger, and they discover that for a distance around him, that there are other pieces of stone that fell from heaven, other than the one that hit him to strike him down. And the realization and the memory came into their minds that such a rock had fallen from heaven in Eden, and word spread quickly that such a rock came again into their midst. And everyone wondered what it could mean. And upon hearing of it, some wondered if their world would change again, as their mother reported. And there were two who had heard it fall, and saw the streak of light, and it fell in the middle of the day, a rock from heaven, and landed upon the earth. And people asked, how could a rock get up there? And no one knew what human death was, and none of them had ever known anyone who had died or heard of it. And they kept waiting for him to come back to life. And Nephesh, reference 12, Nephesh was the one who would be used for the waymark of the resurrection. And Nephesh poked him with a stick, and he did not respond. And they said they did not know a person could end, but clearly Mattaniah ended. And after a few days, they all knew Mattaniah would never get up and walk again upon the earth. And they all asked, will we end too? And the parents could not answer the questions of the children of Mattaniah. And in her grief, Sephi went and stood by him, and she was stupefied and became insensible from the pain in her heart, and she could not speak for many days. And some wondered if she would ever speak again. But after a time she was heard sobbing, and through her grief she came to be able to speak again. And through all this, Kahee was astonished because he did not know of death either, and he had exhibited spells of intense hatred when he was alone. And there were those who would hear him chanting his hatred, and all the mothers would keep their children away from coming near him, and nobody knew what his behavior could mean. And Semihazah had whispered in his ear that if he could give his brother a new name and use hateful feelings for him when he was alone, then Mattaniah would relent and give him his wife. And he named Mattaniah Abel, which means someone who needs to be replaced. And the people heard him repeating that name over and over again during his spells of hatred. And Kahee would magnify his feelings of hatred with clenched teeth, and by his chanting for several days before Mattaniah was ended. And Semihazah delighted in his hatred, and he expected Mattaniah would hate in return, and that by the means of hatred abounding between them, he would find a permanent place in Moladeth. But no hatred came in return, and there was no retaliation. And Mattaniah could feel all these terrible feelings coming toward him, but he never thought to hate back, and he did not know such feelings could be a force to feel. And by the behavior of Mattaniah, Kahee knew that the hatred he was sending was being received. But he did not intend or desire for Mattaniah to die, because Kahee did not know what death was, and he, believing the whispering of Semihazah in his ear, that he would end up with his wife Sephi and her twin sister Azurah also, and the object to have these two women as his wives was for self-aggrandizement of having for himself the only known twin girls to be born upon the earth. And it came to pass that when Kahee began to realize that which has transpired, he was stricken with shame. And Semihazah did not know that such a thing as shame existed, and he was heavily drawn toward it, and it was as though he immediately became fixated upon shame, and he was overjoyed at this new discovery. And Semihazah made shame the central feeling he would seek to feed on among mankind upon the earth. And after he discovered shame, he would use every means at his disposal to bring it about. And over time, he learned to make shame a lifelong experience of those who followed after self-glory. And he would come to use every means to bring shame to a fullness in suicide. So the behaviors of liars and thieves and braggarts and ignorant ruffians and fornicators and all such things may lead to the fullness of shame. And as it would happen, as Semihazah found continuing opportunity to bring shame, he was able to establish Senaseol, and now he had a place in creation where his craftiness could flourish and he could kill with death. And the delight of Semihazah to have a foothold in Nod was soon to diminish because he lost his newfound foothold. Because Kahee and all his family were preparing to leave, and Kahee and his family were the only ones to have shame, and there was no shame left in Moladeth. So Kahee, who was now named Cain, reference 13, Cain, Strong's number 7013, striking fast, from number 6969 to chant. So Kahee, who was now named Cain, ruled over Semihazah, and Semihazah was obliged to follow out with him if he was to continue to feed upon the shame of Cain. And when they all departed, Semihazah looked upon all those leaving, and he declared, all these are mine, and they belong to me, and they will be my kingdom, and I shall rule over them. And thus did Semihazah formulate his new identity, and with the hatred of Cain, the dimensions of his kingdom were set for the duration of the earth, and striking with chanted hatred became the desired way of evil. But there was another set of eyes watching all that has been thus described, and they were looking with cunning avarice, and it was Asael. And shame was not that which had his interest, but he was drawn to the fear and to death. And Asael had not known of death before either, and he became instructed that this newfound source of pleasure in death came about in a conflict with men over a woman. And Asael decided that he wanted war and the beautification of women as his primary source for his power in the earth. And he set his place in creation and established the pit named Shakath. And his new identity and name became Belial. But the new identity of Semihazah came from his delight in accusations and bickering and arguing, which can always lead to hatred and shame, and his new name became Satan. And these two forces that these evil ones came to identify have endured all during the course of the earth until this day. And they both had as their beginning this terrible tragedy with our first family. And this is how both Senaseol and Shakath came into being, and how the war against all things good would be constructed and put into place against the law of Jeshurun. And for all this, it may seem that overbearing forces of evil were now prepared to gain the upper hand all during the course of the earth. But at this time, there were other decisions also being made, and forces of holiness being put in place also, that would abide for the long duration, as well as you will see that in the end come what may. The law of Jeshurun and those who walk in it will prevail to triumph over evil, and all that I heard the Lord say became a comfort to my soul. And I now see Yaatsekawd crying, standing over his son lying upon the ground. And he continued his mourning, and on the 7th day of his grief he heard a voice calling out, and the voice was that of the Lord, and it called Gabriel. And Yaatsekawd answered, "It is I, only Lord, only I am here." And the Lord answered, "Who are you?" And Yaatsekawd was startled, and he said, "I am Yaatsekawd, the first man to make a pathway upon the earth, and the first man to counsel righteousness in creation." And the Lord answered, "It is well spoken. How will you counsel your children, seeing you are their father, and your name is Yaatsekawd?" And this message from the Lord sank deeply into the soul of Yaatsekawd, even to the center of his being. And it came to pass that Yaatsekawd pondered all that the Lord said to him, and he remembered vividly all the counsel the Lord had given them in Eden regarding using all the spirits of life that were put into all things, according to the definition that they had received, and that to do contrary to this was rebellion against Anokeesed. And in the night he went walking, and the moon is full, and he is on the path that leads to the lower pool. And he intends to go there to be with Motsah the Lamb, who is the man in all things, and who is in the living water. And I see the moonlight shimmering upon the pool. And in his pondering, his thoughts were to the Lord. And the Spirit said, "Heretofore you have always considered to use the spirits of life in creation as elements of righteousness. But are not the spirits of life expressed in your children? Righteousness also to be used properly." And upon this advice, by the power of the Spirit, Yaatsekawd stood up with his arms outstretched, and he softly sang a song of praise, and the Lord calls it the Song of Gabriel. Reference 14, 3/4 time, 80 BPM, 7 verses, drum heartbeats. And Yaatsekawd determined that he would use his sons as the element of righteousness to establish a holy pathway back to Eden, and in the presence of Anokeesed, and he said, "It will be a pathway of righteousness and the way that is straight." And he said, "I have chosen my path, and my path leads to righteousness. Anokeesed has created me to do this, and he gave me this task, and it is what I have lived in the temporal world to do. And each of my sons have been given a purpose in creation and a name that defines it. And I shall prepare now to use them as my element of righteousness, to establish for Anokeesed his pathway back to Eden." Reference 15. He was thinking of the condition of Eden, not the place. And the Lord was waiting for him at the upper pool. And Yaatsekawd told him of his plans, and the Lord said, As you do these things, you will be dividing the righteous from the wicked. And from that I understood that since the beginning, walking on this pathway is a vital force that both gathers the righteous together and separates the wicked into separate camps in the eyes of all those in the alliance of heaven. And the Lord went on to say to Yaatsekawd, your division will be sorely pressed during the course of the earth, but help will come, and there will arise a strong one, reference 16, Enoch, who will also divide in creation, and he will write helps upon stone that will support this division. You will make, and after him one, reference 17, Melchizedek, will arise, who will finish the pathway in its final expression by establishing the fruit of the tree of life, and he will be one whose name will declare that the one who guides will be all righteousness. And by this pathway which you will establish, many will choose to not walk in the way of corruptions that are among the people of that day. And it came to pass that on a certain morning, reference 18, he did not know it, but it was the very day that would later be established as the day of instruction, or Shabuah. Yaatsekawd called all of his family to come together, and he sent word to all their dwelling places, and he said, when the sun is at its height in the sky just above the horizon, we will assemble at the upper pool. And he informed them of the task that lay ahead for them. And many wondered at his words, because at this time there was no form of worship that all the people did together. And his idea of using people as the element of righteousness was new to them. And some began to understand that people stand before Anokeesed like all creation, and they each one have a definition in righteousness. And they all began to think about the names they had been given. And I began to look as they were assembling, and I could discern that upon the hillside above the terrace that held the upper pool, there lay stones of Asael. And Asael and the spirits of his fellows remained after Kahee left, to look at all that would transpire under the hand of Yaatsekawd, and they looked narrowly upon all they saw. And the evil one could not anticipate the strength of the powers of holiness that were about to be set in place by our first father. And all the spirits of evil looked upon Yaatsekawd as the least of all men, because he was so gentle and quiet, and his speech was not as other people, because he often chose to speak only the words he heard from the mouth of Anokeesed in Eden. But you will see that our first father was indeed one of the most spiritually powerful men of the Holy Order. Ever to come into that order, and starting with his first memory in Eden, he had lived all his life in the face-to-face presence of Anokeesed, and by his righteousness and obedience, he was a principal force to transform Olam into Eden. And from what I have seen of him with Urim, I doubt that he or Chavah ever sinned again after they left Eden, and most of his repentance was not for sins, but for being able to always walk in the perfect will of Anokeesed. And it came to pass that his sons all came with their families except Kahee, for at this time all his family had departed away. And the breakup of the people was very frightening, because nothing like it had ever happened before, and all the human beings they knew had all lived in the same place since the beginning. And it seemed that it could not be known what would happen to someone who went out into unknown regions. And no one knew what could be found in places where people had never been. And so the breakup of the family had deep and lasting effects. And I saw Yaatsekawd and Chavah weeping, because for them it felt like life was overtaking them. And I see the family of Kahee departing, and two little children are tearfully waving goodbye to each other. And one who was staying is the grandson of Kathan named Yashiyah. And the one who is leaving is the granddaughter of Kahee named Aku. And only Anokeesed knew the meaning of their goodbyes. And I know that they are the rightful companions for one another, and that by the hand of Anokeesed they will find each other in a future day. And they will perform wondrous works of righteousness for him, and thus in the wonderful grace, and compassion of Anokeesed, the two camps will come back together for good. And in their union, evil will once again be subdued. And surely this must be a part of the grace Motsah has for Kahee. And it came to pass that I could feel that all the people had in their minds this new development of separation as they came to this assembly, being summoned by their old father, and somehow they could all sense that their coming together would address this new development in the family. And Yaatsekawd was being a true father under these circumstances. So while evil was using this tragic murder to formulate new identities, the righteous were also setting in place the very foundations that would come to answer and block anything evil could do. And a new identity called the Holy Order was being formed, and Yaatsekawd had the new name of Gabriel. And the awareness that each person has a vision of created purpose became a new identity to the righteous. Now understand that all the people who left were not evil, but because of the shame, it was felt that the whole family had come under the cloud of it. And some felt shame as a family. And the shame was so new and unexpected that it overpowered them. And when they left, the feelings of shame literally went out with them. And everyone could feel it leave. And Semihazah went with them to follow his lust. And so the spirit of expectation surrounded all who assembled at the summons of their old father. And Yaatsekawd began to address all his remaining children, and he brought words of comfort to them, and he said, "Children, we all yet remain in the presence of Anokeesed, and we will carry on with our lives together with him in creation like we always have. And the world will not change for us like it did when the stone of Motsah, the decadent, fell into Eden. I am your father, and I have called you here to counsel both you and all creation, and we will identify and set in place this day your pathway back to Eden, to safeguard all of us against continued separation, and we will all follow this pathway faithfully. And everything will be well with us, and I know his happiness will follow with us on our righteous pathway, and by this means your children and your children's children will be happy and live their gifts of life and well-being together upon the earth." And Yaatsekawd continued, and he said, "I have determined that the pathway back to Eden will have 12 ways which we will mark, that which always ensure that all who walk in the way will be guided in their walking, so they will not stray and be lost to their gifts of life. And Anokeesed has told me that we all will end our journey here in this world someday, and we will return to Eden. And our pathway is our safeguard that we will not lose our way." And Yaatsekawd ended his little speech. "And I see the place where the pathway is to be established, and water is flowing over the brink to form the upper pool, flowing from east to west, and it continues flowing west to fall over another brink to form the lower pool, and it is a double waterfall. And on the north side of the upper pool, there is the cavity in the rock. That is the residence of Yaatsekawd and Chavah. And the water of the pool is just a few steps out from their entryway. And looking south, there is a large expanding terrace between the pools extending southward. And I can see dwellings made of grass in the distance. And the terrace gets wider as it is seen to the south. And on the south of the upper pool close by, there is a large tree growing against the brink, over which the water flows to form the lower pool. And this tree is a large old oak tree, and its shadow in the afternoon sun spreads itself gracefully across the terrace. And all the people are assembled in the shadow of this tree." And Yaatsekawd said, "The spirit Kahee has told me that each of us have a righteous definition from Anokeesed. Like this old tree, and just like we use this tree, according to the spirit of life it has been given, all of us can use our lives. According to the spirit of life we have been given. And so this day I will use my sons according to their names to show the way upon the path of righteousness." And I see Yaatsekawd pointing and showing each man where to stand on the edge of the shadow of the tree. And all the people know the meaning of what he is doing, because they now see their names to be expressing who Anokeesed made them to be. And he lined up his sons starting on the southwest side and moving around to the northwest side. And he and Chavah sat in the middle upon sheepskins, and each man stood upon a sheepskin with his family seated round about him. And each man stood and faced the middle, and Yaatsekawd went out to one at a time and sprinkled element on their feet and spoke to them individually. And all were very quiet to listen. And I see that the two in the east have their feet beside a little stream. Reference 19. On the tablet of Gabriel, the two waymarks, power and glory, represented here are associated with the final judgment. At that time, Motsah the Lamb will be the advocate for all who come there. And this flowing stream is a language of glory, seeping out of the cliff, going into the pool. And I am very interested to hear what Yaatsekawd will say as he performs this ceremony, because he is a man of few words, and I have never witnessed him speaking. The deeper things on his mind, and to me he represents the ultimate expression of pure righteousness coming out of Eden. And I have for a long time wanted to know how he thinks, and how such a pure and righteous mind conceives of creation in relation to Anokeesed. And we have learned that the eternal truth of Anokeesed can best be described by his and Chavah's view of the world. And it came to pass that Yaatsekawd addressed Anokeesed, and the strong presence of their father at the edge of eternity swept heavily in upon the assembly, and it wiped away all fear and sorrow that had been so hard upon them with the breakup of the family. And Yaatsekawd walked out from the center and stood before Asher, and he said, Asher, my son, every rock in this brook of Simcha is where Anokeesed has placed it, and every tree is growing in the place where Anokeesed has given it, and the hills and valleys likewise. But he gave you feet, and he placed your feet upon the earth. And all those living spirits in creation without feet remain where they have been placed. And man alone has been given to have dominion over creation, and we can move rocks and plant trees and move with our feet to choose which hill or valley to walk on. And more importantly, we can choose which pathway our spirit travels upon. And it is the desire of Anokeesed that all the feet of his children walk on the pathway that lead to life and happiness, and that each and every one of them find their way back to live with him. And in my life, I have come to know that all pathways do not lead to him, and some become lost without a way. And the spirit of life in each person is known to be just the way they have been created, and they are not alike, because Anokeesed has so many ways that please his heart, and he delights in the great variety in creation of all things. So each person must find the path of righteousness in their own way. But there is only one pathway that leads back to Anokeesed. And as your feet are upon the ground in the shadow of this old tree, they represent the feet of every human soul in their rightful place upon the earth to commence in the pathway of righteousness. And Anokeesed has created all mankind to be happy, and he wants his house to be filled with the sounds of life coming from his many happy children. And you, my son, will live to be happy. Reference 20, the meaning of Asher. And your feet will serve you well because of this pathway which you have chosen. And I could feel that many who were there upon hearing these words thought upon the pathway that the family of Kahee must now be on, and where it might lead. And many a prayer went out in their behalf, and Chavah felt helpless in her task of joining, and she rocked back and forth in her grieving. But when Yaatsekawd was done with Asher, she sat up straight with a new confidence in the happiness of her children on the pathway of righteousness. And Yaatsekawd went out from the center again, and he went to Azan. And he said, Azan, you are my help and my strength. Azan, your breath is your life. For when Anokeesed speaks his words of loving kindness You breathe in the breath that formed his words. Reference 21. When you speak according to the Spirit, you are speaking with God's breath. And the breath of Anokeesed gives life to your soul, and there are others who choose the breath of those who speak angry and hateful words. But your heart has ears, and your chest knows whose breath you are breathing. And just as the wind blows across the hills, the breath of the words of Anokeesed blow along the pathway back to Eden. And when you know that in your chest you are now breathing the breath of his words, you can know to look to find the righteous pathway again. And it is the word of his power to love you that will lead you in the way. And thus it is expedient that all the children of the righteous repent for any time they find words or thoughts that are angry or hateful. And he placed Harari upon the feet of Azan, and he blessed his feet to always walk in the way, being led by the breath of Anokeesed. And he went again to the center to be with Chavah, and he moved out toward Elah. And he took Chavah with him, and he said, My son Elah, your waymark on the righteous pathway is to walk cautiously and to protect and guard the truth of the words of Anokeesed, and lay claim to it, and not let go, and examine everything in your heart, and listen to the truth, and gently urge your fellows to cling to the truth. And Chavah, standing in her place beside him, stretched out her arms and sang some of her song, and she laid hold of the gift of discernment and bestowed it upon Allah. And she touched his forehead with two of her fingers, and she said, For those who walk in the truth, evil has many surprises that can catch them unaware, and they are called lies. And you must watch with diligence and care to protect the truth, and the truth does not change, but always remain to be found in loving kindness on the holy pathway in the breath of Anokeesed. And his parents returned to the center. And it was now the place of Mabuji to be addressed. And Yaatsekawd went out to him, and he was young and tall. And Yaatsekawd embraced him, and they both wept for a moment together. And Yaatsekawd said, And Anokeesed is your father, and a loving one who will lead you to walk beside still waters, and the waters of sweetness will gird you up all your days, and in time he will bring you and your family to a land of lustrous waters that shine with the light of peace and tranquility, and the righteous pathway is one of such joys. And Motsah the Lamb will be your shepherd, and he is the living water that goes out with you. And I have somewhat to instruct you this day. And know that living water flows, and in its flowing it carries life along with it, and it can cleanse if it is followed in its journey. And it begins each little journey anew by bringing into your mind advice of correction. And when correction is openly made welcome, then the right steps upon the pathway are known, and when taken, they lead you back to the peace and tranquility of your shepherd's embrace. And you will find repentance to be sweet, like a drink of cool, clear water in the heat of the day. And by these words and with this instruction and prophecy, Mabuchi was comforted, and he sat back upon the ground being content. And once again Yaatsekawd went out from the center, and he approached Azura, who was holding the little baby Seth in her arms, reference 22, her future husband. And he said, You are the son of my repentance and my forgiveness. The Lord has forgiven me for my failures as a father, and I have felt like all the sins of my children must be laid upon me as a burden, and I have accepted my burdens. And your waymark on the pathway of righteousness is one that will find your feet being washed in newness by the morning dew upon the grass. And you are a brother to the grasses of the field, and as the rocks of the field are my witness, you shall find the words of the breath of Anokeesed to be written upon a stone. And his words of forgiveness will go forth to all the world written upon a stone. And because of the truth your stone will bring to this pathway of righteousness, the truth will be known, and the eyes of many will be opened to a knowledge of their forgiveness, and your ministry of service to Anokeesed, my baby son, will bless and comfort those who have lost their way upon the pathway back to Eden. And the grass of the field will dance in their joy. And Yaatsekawd kissed baby Seth, and he said, May all who behold the stone of this little son, reference 23, this is the repentance tablet, which has on it the tree of life, with the 12 waymarks like that of the tablet of Gabriel. May all who behold the stone of this little son come to know that they are loved and forgiven for their sins and be blessed forever. And continuing on, Yaatsekawd came out to stand before Edra, and he took both his hands in his, and he said, My good son Edra, these hands of yours are holy, and they are made to bless, and to touch injured places with tenderness to heal them. And you are to bless the food of the people to make it sacred, and a hand of kindness reaching down to lift up the fallen is like the hand of Anokeesed himself. And your hands will act in his behalf to love the fallen and the lost, and those in the distress that sin brings in with shame. And you and Pathua are messengers bringing gentle reproof, and the light of Anokeesed will shine on others, like a fire of shining healing, reference 24. Edra is a fire keeper and a healer. And you are one who is to love in spite of sin, and you are to bring the voice of the fire to the people and teach them the skills of compassion. For those who are groping to find their way like a stranger to Anokeesed, and your guide will be Motsah the Lamb himself, and his presence will cover the two of you like a mantle of healing. And Yaatsekawd placed healing stones in their hands and blessed their hands, and he closed their hands upon the stones and prayed a little prayer. And Yaatsekawd stood before Elah again, and he said, You are standing here to take the place of my son Keneh, who was born to us as a sweet reed, and of all the waymarks of this pathway of righteousness that will lead mankind back to Eden. You are to be the most firmly rooted and tenacious to your sacred service to Anokeesed, so that Anokeesed can be known, and his truth can come to the heart of man. And you are to relay the words of counsel and truth, resident in the Eerkodeshiy, to the people, and teach the people to pray to Anokeesed in all their joys and cares and needs for wisdom and understanding. And you are the first person to be born upon the temporal earth, and as such you are to be a way for the people to come close to the holiness of Eden in their knowledge and understanding. And you are to walk among the trees, for they are clothed with glory, and you are brother to the trees of the heights, and they each one are your brothers and sisters in the truth of Anokeesed. And you are to take care not to turn to the right nor to the left of this waymark, for there can come many enticing subtleties, calling one to believe a lie. So carefully divide the truth and cling to your father Anokeesed at every step of the way to protect his truth. And he stooped down and drew sand around the feet of Elah to separate his steps from the steps of the wicked. And the vision was long, so he rested and came back in a few days to continue with Urim. And I beheld once again the ceremony upon the tree beside the pool, and Yaatsekawd and Chavah are still in the center. And now I can see that they represent the Star of Elda, reference 25. How they represent the Star of Elda lies in why they are establishing Jeshurun. First, they are establishing the holy pathway for an Anokeesed, loving him first. Then they counsel each one to bless them to walk in the way, loving your fellow second. Thus they represent the first and second commandments upon which all the law hinges. In the center of the tablet, and he approached Nephesh in the place of his waymark on the holy straight pathway, and he said, My little son Nephesh, when your father Mattaniah was very young, he always wanted me to tell him what happened in Eden, and I rehearsed to him the story of the account. When Motsah asked us to go into the water with him and covenant with him that we would always love him and repent of our daily sins, and if we were careful to do that, he would lead us back into Eden to live with Anokeesed. And so he entered into the water when he was a young man, following our example, and the promise of being led back to live with Anokeesed burned brightly in his heart. And it has been a year now, with the seasons coming back again, since your father was ended. And before he was ended, he told me that Motsah had visited him and told him that his time to live here in the temporal world would end. And the Lord Motsah touched him, and he said, "You are my righteous one, and I stand to declare to you that you will breathe again and stand with me." And so your father named you Nefesh, which means to breathe again. And we do not know how he will accomplish that for us, because our father's bones still lie upon the ground, and I know that the hope of living past our walk here in this world sustains your mother and I in our sorrow as we wonder about the meaning of our lives. And so the place you stand this day in the shadow of this tree is the waymark that marks our everlasting hope of returning back to Eden again, and it is a place of faith and believing in things we do not know or understand. And little Nefesh, you are also now my son this day, and I will be a father to you all your days. And Yaatsekawd went out again to approach Micah, and he said to him, "Your vision, the reason Anokeesed made you, is for you to always walk in the midst of the elements of righteousness. So everything you eat and wear, and the things your hands do to make your dwelling place to live, and where you walk, will be for you like the bread of life, to contain within themselves the presence of the man who is in all things. And in this way, the spirit and presence of the man, who is one of the four spirits of life that is in all things, will walk with you in the way of righteousness. And you will find that in your future days, Motsah will be your anchor, attaching you to the pleasant things of Eden. And Micah, your place before Anokeesed is one of provision. You are to be a provider of both the temporal things and the spiritual, and you will one day stand by a pool of heaven, just like the one here with us. And it will gush forth spiritual provisions for many people. And the news that comes to your pool of heaven will be sent abroad in the earth to enlighten the way of many, and you will find rich happiness with me in the end of your days. And it came to pass that the shadow had moved when he came out to Kahee, and Yaatsekawd had him move a little, to be standing in the shadow again. And Yaatsekawd raised his hand upward towards heaven, and he said, "My beloved son Kahee, your inheritance from Eden and your call to serve Anokeesed is to see that the example Anokeesed put in place when he married your mother and I in Eden will continue to be practiced and viewed as the utmost righteousness in the earth. And what he established with us in the sacredness of marriage will not fade away in memory, but be firmly established among your family and among all people. And you and all who are like you in the sanctity of marriage are to be the voice of all the male and female spirits of life upon the earth. And you are to speak for all the mothers and fathers in creation to see that their children are honored, preserved, and protected. And you are to come to their aid in all their times of distress, and feed and care for their orphans and their seeds, that they will not wither away. And they will feed your children and see to it that they do not wither away with hunger nor neglect. And all the trees and animals and birds and insects and rivers with the stones of the earth are parents, and will be joined to you in your spirit as the example of holiness in marriage. And this is how the dominion of mankind can flourish in all the course of the earth. And the sanctity of marriage will undergird all the powers of heaven, extending clear into Elda, the dwelling place of Anokeesed himself. And this is your waymark in the pathway to Anokeesed, and the sounds emanating from the power of the sanctity of marriage will be the sounds of life that none can quiet, but they shall roar like the sounds of our waterfalls. And when Yaatsekawd came out to Yaakov, he had not been paying attention, and he had fallen asleep. Reference 26. In time, Yaakov and his wife established astrology and the fertility cult of Ashtoreth, the Queen of Heaven. And Yaatsekawd did not wake him, and he said, Yaakov, there will be a ferocious effort to come against all these waymarks on the straight pathway, and despair can come in as it has upon all of us, and you are counseled not to grow weary, but to endure in strength in your calling, and magnify endurance in the holiness of your marriage by entering into repentance, to never depart from the way, so that you will travel with the Lord Motsah as he goes out with you. And Motsah will be like a shining beacon of rays coming through the clouds to shine upon the earth. Reference 27. Rays of sunlight passing through the clouds is one of the 24 conditions, and it speaks of the truth that you can achieve your vision. And Yaatsekawd prayed soft and urgent prayers over his sleeping son. And I saw Chavah weeping as she sat in her place. And Kodesh, your full name is Eerkodeshiy, because you are the one who upholds all those collected to live together in their way of holiness and in your way. There will always remain the hope of Eden upon the earth, and like me, you are one who is to instruct all the spirits of life on the earth in creation, in how to walk and live in holiness. And all heaven will be there for you to strengthen you, and to gather around you, and to assemble yourselves in your behalf. And Motsah himself will come to walk upon the earth with your people, and they will be called Maween, the dwelling place of Anokeesed and all the holy spirits of life in creation. And it came to pass that all the people were weary, for the long time Yaatsekawd was speaking, and they began to disperse. But Yaatsekawd and Chavah remained in their place, and the presence of Motsah drew near. And it wrapped itself around these two parents in gentle warmth, and our old first parents embraced him fully. And Yaatsekawd said to him, Dear Motsah, I have counseled my sons and all my children according to your desires, and I have presented to them and to all the Eerkodeshiy the pathway in which they should walk, and they are free to choose their way. And I have marked 12 waymarks in the pathway to make them plain and easy to remember, and all of heaven and earth are my witnesses. And Yaatsekawd looked about, and he said to creation, Always remember this day for my children, and be diligent to bring to mind these things that we have done here today. And I would ask you to record what I have established in heaven, and let all things be known in Eden, and comfort Anokeesed to know that his children who chose the straight pathway will be coming home to him, and thus it is done. And it came to pass, as I was listening intently in wonder of all that came before me, I began to hear vast multitudes praising and lauding Anokeesed for the graciousness of his fatherhood. And because now there was a way, and it was plain to me that all heaven set themselves with firm resolve to see to it all was done according to the words of Yaatsekawd. And I was startled at the sounds of it, for in my mind I thought I was the only one listening. But all the concourse of heaven and earth were thus assembled to participate in the momentous event. And the Lord said to me before the Urim, This is indeed a wonderful time, for the first man and woman who are in the holy order have established the law of my Father, and they have set firmly in place the 12 waymarks of the pathway to Eden, that shall endure through the whole course of the earth, and these waymarks will not vary away, nor become dissipated with the passing of time, and they shall be brought out of obscurity in every needful time, to be a sure way for the house of Israel and the peoples of the nation, who are the intermingled among the fallen and disobedient, and they have done this for me. And I was much moved by all this that was before me. And in the days that followed, I saw Yaatsekawd and Chavah sing the pipe song, reference 28. This song is an honor song to honor the establishment of the law. And it was sung in remembrance of the burden of Motsah and the assistance he now had with the way being established. And the Lord said, This song is my song of comfort, and Chavah is singing it in a high tone, and Yaatsekawd is singing it in a lower tone. And they sing the verse 7 times bowed down toward the north. and the people are collected round in 4 groups, with their old parents in the middle. And there is a group in each of the 4 directions. And Yaatsekawd starts the song, with only the east group joining in with the first verse. And the Lord said, the first verse is inviting the east and all its fields with both me and my Father. And all the other groups are quiet, with just the east group singing. And in the second verse, the people in the south join in to petition the south to add its feelings of both me and my Father to bring comfort and support. And in this way, with each verse, the song becomes louder, with more voices joining in. And this is repeated with each verse for all 4 directions. And on the 5th, those in the 4th station join in, and the song is sung toward heaven. And the 6th verse is sung to the earth, and the Eerkodeshiy join in. And finally, with the 7th verse, all heaven and earth sing to Motsah himself. And I can feel his visage before my eyes, and I know all who are righteous and walk in the way can see him in their minds. And it came to pass that I pondered all the vision that had come before me, and I wondered how evil would respond, and I considered how all of this may affect our world. And the Lord said to me, now listen to the people. Verse 29, listen to the people. Remember at this time the first great sevening is in progress. These Decadarchiy are going to speak just what they hear from the wicked, and to the forces of darkness allied with them. And there are 4 of the Decadarchiy here, who are noteworthy in the times ahead. And there is Asael, who now is named Belial, and Semihazah, who now is named Satan. And there are 2 counselors who are Ramael and Zekeel. Reference 30, petroleum and generated electricity. Listen to what they will say and feel, and they are speaking in boisterous terms and bragging. And the feelings and presence of all this evil was such a contrast to what I had seen that I shrunk back. And these 4 evil ones were very unclean, and they were loathsome and putrid. And I am the pride master over all the earth. And when they came to the 5th way mark, forgiveness, they were hesitant and seemed confused and a little afraid. And I felt that the spirit of recompense was there to meet them. And I could see that Asael beheld their silence, and he asserted, forgiveness is a myth, and sin and waywardness are simple accusations that have no substance, and our actions in secret cannot be known. And Zekeel, who is electricity, approached first to the 6th way mark of the power to love in spite of sin, and his ignorance was made evident. And I could see that his alienation from creation was absolute. And alienation would follow all who desired and depended upon him. And he swelled up and said, the earth is power, and we have power to overwhelm and control the conduct of all things according to our will. And Asael was waiting at the 7th way mark, glory, and he was sitting there like he was a monarch. And much arrogance emitted from him like a beacon of superiority. And he said, who is God that any need know about him? And we have heard nothing from him. Why should he tell us anything? For I myself will rise up to be like the Most High, and I shall be a son of God. And at the 8th way mark of the resurrection, they all stopped to ponder there. And they spoke together, and they concluded, there will not be a day of recompense, for there was none in Eden. And to this day there is no day of recompense for us, because we are wise, and we are prudent in how we conduct ourselves. And while we have seen that man can die, we will not die, and our spirits go whithersoever they choose, and thus it will always be. And when they came to the 9th way mark of the bread of life, they were afraid, and they went quietly by and did not say anything. And it seemed to me that in their view the bread was best left undisturbed, and the power of it was very mysterious to them. And they had heard that there was a man's spirit there that could not be overcome. And on the 10th way mark, for the family, Asael said, we can make fornication pleasurable, and it will ever be inviting to those who breathe our breath. And women are nothing to us, except to be used to entice with the form of their beauty. And I will see that their beauty is enhanced and enlarged. And they all made exclamations of glee over the 11th waymark to endure. And they remembered Yaakov had slept through his counsel at this waymark. And they said, we will give Yaakov dreams of instruction, and his wife will obey us, and we will establish fornication in heaven and upon the earth. Reference 31. I know this will become the worship of Ashtoreth and become a snare for Israel. And Asael said, we will kill with death, and people will take their own lives at our bidding, and not be able to endure, and they will kill one another with no regrets. And I will marshal multitudes to contend together unto death, and graves will crop up like flowers on a hillside, and that will be an everlasting monument to me, that this pathway cannot endure. And at the last waymark, Zion, I was tired of listening and wished it would be over. And Asael said, we will establish collections of people who will be called cities. And I knew that they would call the first city after the name of Enoch, the son of Keneh, in order to mock Maween under the leadership of Enoch, the scribe of righteousness. And they could not forecast how the holy pathway of the law in Jeshurun would be a city of holiness. But it would come to be that in future days they would recognize the threat and turn all their evil powers to fight against Maween to no avail because of the power of the Lion of Judah. And I was glad it was over, and a foreboding covered me, and I know that many hardships and trials await the children of Anokeesed. And the hosts of heaven are hearing all these things, and I feel much turmoil of soul among them. And the Lord said to us all, be peaceful, for the forces of evil are not all-consuming, and they are only powerful to be all-consuming if they are allowed to be. And through the law, the righteous will curtail their power and keep them in check. And the 12 waymarks of the pathway to Eden will subdue them over and over again. And that is why they are so afraid of it. So rejoice, for this day I will send help. For my people who walk here in the holy pathway, and the help will be firm and effective and long-lasting. And it will endure for all the course of the earth and into eternity. And I will raise up Enoch, and he will protect and support the holy pathway. And the Lord said, look, and I will show you marvelous things that will buoy you up with what will transpire with Enoch. And it will give you strength when you despair for the 12 waymarks of Jeshurun. And now I will reveal to you all that came against Enoch to prevent his help. And it came to pass that I looked, and the vision began to form a new direction, leading me to be informed about the help from Enoch that the Lord had spoken of that he would bring. And I once again see Mattaniah lying on the ground, and I am witnessing the trauma brought about by this death. But this time I see Keneh among the people who are approaching to see him, and he was astonished. And he had a hard time connecting what he did in his hateful prayers to this violence against his brother. But inside himself he knew he had done it, and he felt a despair he had never known before, and he could not formulate repentance in his mind to think or to say it. And he had grown into adulthood, ignoring his parents' teachings concerning repentance. And now, in his desperate hour, he was left without a way. And for him, there was a complete loss of what to do. And he durst not speak of it to his father. And for him, there was no way to fix or to undo what had occurred. And no one had ever known of running away from sin. Where could he go? What could he do? And after those days, all the people became afraid of him and the wine. And they thought and wondered, will they hate me to death? Will they chant a new name for me until I end and my life is stopped? But I see Awan to be very different. She had not participated in killing Mattaniah, but she was delighted that her husband failed to acquire another wife, and she had no compassion for him, and she revealed in a new felt satisfaction with the new sense of power brought to her by the people's fear of them. And when provisions were acquired, Many expressions of sharing and gratitude were usually shown in Moledeth. But now when they brought new provisions into camp, Awan took all she wanted, and no one would say anything to her, and all the people did not want anything of theirs, because they considered that hatred permeated their food and all their possessions, and a new awareness of clean and unclean was come to the people. And I could see that it was fear that brought division, and the fear of offending had never been known in the land. And for many, the world changed again with the arrival of the meteorite into Moledeth, and fear prevented repentance and kept the hearts of the people separate from the family of Kahee. And Kahee was always mysterious because he was not born in the temporal world, and they attributed his deeds to all his family, and it was like a superstition. And it came to pass that the people began to move away from living beside them, and Kahee and Awan wanted all their family to collect to live where they were. And thus 2 camps began to be shown, and where Kahee dwelt was given the new name of Nod, reference 32. Nod, Strong's number 5110, was the name of the original village of mankind and meant to skip with joy. But after this event, the name came to mean to flee, be a vagabond, and referred to the part of the encampment of Kahee that was set apart from the rest of his family and Moledeth. And the children were not allowed to play together, for fear that hatred would arise and swell up, and Nod was unkept in its cleanliness, and the sounds of life diminished away there, and the shame in Kahee grew day by day. And he finally could endure no more, and his entire family laid their provision to and moved out into the unknown. And they had to stop in their travels because they could not get along with one another, and desperation accompanied them when they found themselves to be in want. And no one had ever known the kind of life that sprang up because of sin, and Semihazah followed with the people. And there were some members of Kahee's family who would be righteous, and they were caught up in the turmoil, and the Lord had compassion on them. And there came a day that they were rescued by Amaziyadad with his band of rescuers. And it came to pass that Kahee camped on the edge of the valley of Yashiyah, and most of the rest of his people went on down into the valley. And this was because Kahee wanted to live alone, and Awan had no one to bring her provisions except Kahee, and her evil began to increase, and her subtleties were wearisome. And after the relatives of Yaatsekawd were rescued, their camp was empty, and Kahee abandoned Awan. And in her old age she took up with a vile old man. And together they did mischief before the face of Anokeesed, and she also became a midwife for the Nephilim. But before this had occurred, little Yaatsekawd was growing up into womanhood, and she was a lovely person. And as she approached the time to be of age, her father saw the evil men had designs on her, and he heard plans to take her away into the valley of Yashiyah, and they had plans to trade her for provisions. And her father listened to the voice of the Lord to him, and he got up in the middle of the night, and he had prepared for her a little bundle of provisions. And he woke her up and gave her instructions to go to the south away from Tawah. And he knew of no person who lived there, and the way back to Moledeth was not safe. And he prayed for her and said, I do not know what you will find there, but Anokeesed will guide you in the way. And he followed her out a little ways to see her off. And Yaatsekawd set out in the dark of night, and she traveled for 40 days. And as she went, she saw not any person. And the Lord guided her, and he said to her, walk on the slopes of the high places, reference 33. See 5:9-7 for slopes. To ascend, be up high, to raise, recover, restore. Because no one who may pursue you will think to look for you there, and I will cause you to escape out of the hands of your pursuers. And the Lord guided her in the way, and he did more than that. As she went day by day, he taught her from on high many things concerning her vision of created purpose. And when her travels were over, she was truly born again. And finally, on a day when she thought she could go no further, she saw a line of travelers slowly making their way along the slopes of the high places at a long distance. And she was drawn to go to them. And when they saw her, she hailed them. And they came and carried her to be with them. And it was Micah. And her spirit was drawn to him, and she rejoiced greatly. And her clothes were tattered, and she was faint with hunger. And when she heard the name of Micah, and realized she had found the righteous people of Moladeth, she fainted and had a good sleep. And I saw that Asael was angry, and he said that Yaakov rightly belonged to him, as she was in the company who departed with Kahee, and he had designated her for other men. And he greatly resented the love of the people of Micah for her. And it came to pass that after those days Asael watched her, looking for an opportunity to take her back. And the Lord is saying, in these doings of Asael, the mystery can be known of how a person can be opposed in their generations before they are born. And this is because Asael and all his cohorts in Shakath gather intelligence while in the company of expressions of righteousness. And for this reason, it is incumbent upon the righteous to take measures to see that there is no contention or discord while sacred worships are being conducted, because discord and sin can invite evil to watch the proceedings. And Asael is a schemer and a plotter, and he found ways to be present to find a way to take her back. And when she was married, Asael was there looking on narrowly at the birth of her first child. Reference 34, Baraka. And he overheard the description of her vision, and it became known to him that she would be the mother of one who would bring help and support to the pathway back to Eden. And he set his face against her starting at her birth, because he greatly feared the 12 waymarks of Jeshurun. And it came to pass that as Baraka grew into young womanhood to come of age, the Lord told Yashiyah and Yaakov to send her back from Qatar to Anak in Maween for her safety. And the righteousness there would be strong protection for her as she approached to live out her vision, and Asael was afraid to go to Anak. But Asael followed along with her, and he became determined that she would have no children born alive. And there were many in Chavah who were guided by the spirit of evil, and Asael instructed hunters to feed Jared, who is the father of Enoch, the flesh of the wound of an Ayala beast. Reference 35, a female oryx. The male is called an Ayal, who was killed while pregnant, to be the element of wickedness to destroy the child in the womb. And one of the names of Enoch was Ayala. And I saw that the Lord used our first mother, who with her husband established the pathway that Enoch was to protect. And she did this to save the child alive, for the sake of her husband's yearnings to go back to Eden. And by her use of the element of righteousness, the Lord had his way, and Enoch was born alive. And Chavah prophesied great things, and by her hand, reference 36, she used bulrushes. Asael was not there to hear them, and Enoch made 6 divisions, and they were all aimed at protecting, supporting, and preserving the 12 waymarks of Jeshurun. And it came to pass that when we met next to view the vision with a clear awareness came to me of just how awful all this evil was. And I wept before the Lord and the scribes, and I was grieved for the Lord and his heavy burden that has lasted for so long. And I said, this scribe session is for you, Lord. I am sorry evil is so bad. All of heaven was singing for their joy in the doings of Yaatsekawd, when he established the holy pathway, and with the response of evil, all heaven became quiet, and I grieved with them. And I could feel your burden, Lord, and I could feel you anticipating the suffering that evil would bring with the war on Jeshurun. And I tried to have hope by remembering that you said you would bring help so that evil would not overtake the righteous. And it came to pass that the vision before my eyes changed, and I began to see Enoch in the lair of his old father where he lived in Eden. And I see Enoch as he looks with And the Lord said to me, here is my help. And in that moment, I was so grateful for Enoch, and his manner and confidence was comforting. And the Lord said, the help that comes from Enoch will endure to protect our righteous pathway during all the course of the earth. However, at the end of days during tribulation times, the flame of the lamp of Jeshurun must come to shine forth again for the last time. And Enoch looked, and he beheld with his eyes the burden of the Lord. And I know what that means to a man who loves him. And Enoch had compassion on the Lord, and in that moment he determined to take the part of all the people who are the children of Anokeesed. And he saw the cunning and evil of those in Shakath. And he understood the vision, and he knew that all Yaatsekawd accomplished could be stripped away from any memory. And he saw what Yaatsekawd did to establish Jeshurun, and he knew just what it meant for him to divide the righteous from the wicked. And Enoch remembered the prophecies that came at his birth by our mother Chavah, because they had been recited to him over and over all his days while growing to be a man. And it came to pass that the Spirit moved upon Enoch, and the spirit and presence of Eden was there to surround him. And on the floor by him was the grindstone of Chavah, right where she had left it when she left Eden. And the reality of Eden was magnified before his soul because of the elements of their former home. And the contrast between seeing the Lord's heavy burden with the sorrow of it and the joys of Eden entered into his soul. And then in that moment he determined that he would follow Yaatsekawd's example in dividing spiritual powers to expose them in their evil, and to reveal the good in creation and the glories of righteousness. And Enoch knew that the righteous would be intermingled with the wicked. And he knew that Asael and Semihazah intended to deceive many in their war against all things good, and especially against the law, as they saw it as the greatest threat to their power and dominance. And Enoch decided to first divide the sons of heaven, so that Asael and all the hosts of the Decadarchiy would become known and their evil exposed, and the account of it has been written. And he named them all with proper names, even those who worshipped the God of power and might. And also he named those who loved the gentleness of Eden. And he revealed all the righteous wonders of the Eerkodeshiy, and what they teach, and all they do in their holiness and strength. And he also revealed all the uncleanness and deceits of the Decadarchiy, and what they teach in their steadfastness to be evil, and all they do in their wickedness, and all their hatred. And he made all things bare before the eyes of all the people. And he spread word among the people, and so he protected one generation after the other. And he turned the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their parents. And he did all this with a mighty hand, to protect the waymarks of the bread of life and the living water. And it felt to Enoch like he barely escaped out of Senaseol after naming the Decadarchiy. But the glories of the Eerkodeshiy will always stay in his heart. And I must say that since I first viewed this with at that time it was known to me that Methuselah was born right when Enoch was confronting the Decadarchiy by dividing the waters at the rock of Emeth. And this little son of his went the bad way, it being caused somehow by the retaliation of the evil ones there. And they hated him for setting in place the day of recompense. And he sent bitter herbs upon the waters that flowed down into Senaseol and on into Shakath. And in this way Enoch, with this division of the waters, protected and ensured the two-way marks of power and glory, which represent the great judgment. And he did this so there could be no deception, that people and the watchers could act without recompense. And he set in place that every person would have a conscience to know in their inner self right from wrong. And it came to pass when Enoch returned home, he divided the authority of elder to bring effective ministry to all the righteous, and to join them to Anokeesed in all their daily walk on the righteous path. And because he did this division, the waymarks of salvation and redemption are preserved, as long as the men of service are diligent to walk with their Father as they go in the way together. And in this way it could be known how the desires of Anokeesed for his children could be kept in place. And in those days, Enoch was aware of the growing intensity of the war evil was waging against Jeshurun. And he spent some years trying to find how to bring adequate protection to the families of those who followed the holy pathway. And at last, by fasting to find his answer, he discovered that he needed to divide all the souls of men in a way that the Eerkodeshiy would recognize who were their own. And he established the sanctity of marriage as the indicator to the Eerkodeshiy as to who they were. And his division became a bulwark against fornication, and the cries of the children would not be heard. And in this way, Enoch fortified the two waymarks of families and protection. And Enoch set in place the power of the sanctity of marriage to be the foremost source of righteousness upon the earth. And Enoch went on to divide the days of men into their respective memorial days, to be shared with their father Anokeesed. And the righteous sleep with him, and walk with him, and work with him, and eat with him. And the pillow of compassion for Anokeesed is the delight of the host of heaven. And by these marvelous things, Enoch enhanced their contact with the Spirit, and their ability to endure their trials and hardships, brought on by corruptions on the earth, was made strong. And he set in place that Anokeesed in his loving kindness could shine brightly in their lives, and in this division Anokeesed was well pleased. And lastly, Enoch divided the earth, and he set in place the voices of the four directions, and he set in place eternal truth. And he did this by using the view that Yaatsekawd and Chavah had, as they looked out with their eyes at creation and Anokeesed, and how they viewed and understood creation, and Anokeesed became the standard by which all truth would be measured forever at the final judgment. And it can be seen that Enoch, by all these divisions, protected all the waymarks of the holy pathway to Eden, which is Zion, and the visions of every person who would walk in the way, even every waymark in their place, reference 37. You will notice that each division of Enoch protected make neat pairs of waymarks with one from each side of the tablet. And what Enoch accomplished in all these divisions was so powerful that it could not be overcome. And Maween was successful, and it prospered under his hand. And the people there did indeed return to Eden by walking on the holy pathway of Jeshurun. And this is why Senaseol and Shakath are afraid of the law of Jeshurun. And you will see that this is also why they will come to hate Chavah, as it informs Jeshurun. And Enoch used Chavah to keep the Eerkodeshiy in the way of Jeshurun during the first great 70. And he did this by using the day of instruction every year to remind the Eerkodeshiy thoroughly of the dominion of Yaatsekawd and Chavah, and of their being responsible to maintain all four spirits of life in themselves. And he used the day of instruction in the same way Yaatsekawd did in Eden, to dress and keep creation in the way according to its created order. But Melchizedek set Chavah in place and established it to inform the law. And in this way, the law of Jeshurun became finished and complete in its establishment during the first shining of the lamp of Anokeesed with the light of truth. And thus ends the account of the first lamp on the bottom of the salvation side of the tablet. This completes chapter 2 of the Tablet of Gabriel. Shalom, family.